Welcome, everyone. My name is Michelle Galindo, and I am one of your facilitators or co presenters for today's session. We are so happy that you have joined us in this important topic. I am locally from San Diego County and have been working with Family Childcare at its best for a little bit over than 12 years. And so this topic I've presented several times and also in Spanish. Family Childcare at its best is a program funded by California Department of Social Services and is now administered by WestEd, the Early Childhood Learning and Development. So thank you so much for participating today with us. We want to mention that today's topic is a snapshot of what the entire curriculum looks like. And our entire curriculum for this topic, Building Numeracy Skills and Beyond, is a 5-hour professional development opportunity. At Family Talk at its best offers 21 topics and in various languages. So we do encourage you at the end, we're going to share more about the website so you can learn more about this topic and other topics that we provide. Corey, my partner, will show her introduction.
Thank you, Michelle. So just a quick introduction from me. I'm Corey Schmidt. I'm also one of your facilitators this morning or afternoon. And I join you from my home in Fresno County, California. And very glad to have you here. This is an important topic, and it's one that many often feel lost, if math has been a challenge. So I'm just thrilled that you have the opportunity to take in so many new resources and experiences today to support your ability to support children. Michelle?
Yes, thank you, Corey. So now we would like to learn a little bit more about you. You've heard about us, and we would like to invite you to participate in reflecting about your comfort level. Tell us your name and age range of the children that you care for. And thinking about a scale from 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with supporting early math development? Sometimes we think about math and we're like, oh no, that's not a topic that I'm really passionate. But we want to discover along with you how a meaningful and relevant and everyday experiences make connections. But what is your comfort level? If you take a moment to go ahead and share that number and tell us your name and age range you care for.
And we're aware that we have about a minute delay between the question we ask and when we may see your responses. So we'll continue on and see those responses as we go along.
Thank you so much for your participation, and we are eager to find out what your comfort level looks like in different locations where you're at. And as you're serving children and we're planning for children's learning experiences, really thinking about how do I feel about these math activities and materials and spaces for our youngest learners. Well, thank you. And the truth is that we use math all the time. Mathematics really nurtures certain abilities that are extremely important in the long term influence and power of reasoning, creativity, abstract or spatial thinking, critical thinking, and problem solving abilities, along with effective communication skills. So let's take a look at some research and review. Maybe some reminders or reinforcers. Children naturally explore topics such as patterns, shapes, capacity, volume, addition, transformations in their daily play experiences. As young as infants, toddlers, as they're going about their day, they are learning to walk, and you find that they're categorizing items by shape or type naturally with us without an adult guiding them. So they have a natural instinct to be mathematical. So we want to be able to scaffold, observe, and promote these skills in young children. Another research and review is finding that educators underestimate children's math abilities. So we think, how am I going to teach math abilities? Well, guess what? Children are very capable and very competent. And because math is a natural process for them. They're naturally inclined to add their toys, take away their toys without even thinking that it's mathematical concepts. And also, mathematical content should be connected to informal everyday life. Make it meaningful, relevant, relatable to children. How does it connect with when we're cooking, or we're playing outdoors in nature, or when they are manipulating their different materials and toys? How are we integrating integrated learning experiences? They build on children's play. Daily activities, interests, and questions are promoted. They're encouraged to ask why, how, what. And it's our role to really support these responses, identifying their interest with math language.
Thank you, Michelle. So I want to point out that much of our information today that we're sharing comes from the California Preschool Learning Foundations, which you can see the link on the screen. When we get to the next slide, you'll see a link to the California Infant Toddler Learning and Development Foundations, because what we want to know is what does the research say that young children should be, or we would expect to see in their math development? How can I make sure that my expectations are developmentally appropriate? And we know that that's true both for infants and toddlers and for preschoolers. I'm going to add one more bit to the research. Research shows, and this might surprise you, that math ability when children enter kindergarten is a better predictor of future school success than reading ability at that time, even a better predictor of their future reading success. So when we think about the importance of supporting math development, we look at the bigger picture and we recognize that this is a really important stepping stone for children. You'll find in the Preschool Learning Foundations these 4 different curriculum principles for early childhood mathematics. We're going to focus on the latter 2, but I want to just make a couple of points about content you'll find in the foundations, both preschool and infant toddler content. What's the what that we expect them to learn? And then you'll find the how, the process of how can I support that. You'll find both of those in the foundations and also in the infant and toddler curriculum framework, California. You can Google that one. We'll be focusing our time today on both environment and materials and child-centered choices, as Michelle has mentioned. I also want to mention an acronym that you may hear today, not only in our session, but other places. STEAM. It used to be STEM, now it's STEAM. And I just want to point out, this is because we don't sit infants and toddlers and preschoolers down and say, right now you're learning math. It's holistic. It happens in their play. And so you'll hear this acronym, and it stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. They all go together, and the principles and the concepts really support one another as the child learns in their play. So I just wanted to point that out in case you're hearing that acronym as you go along. So this next slide that's loading here has a couple of questions for us, because when this California publication of California Learning Foundations for Preschool came out, there was some debate, because the more play-based programs say, well, we don't want to have this hard academic drive, because we believe in play-based learning. And with some of the more academic programs may view foundations a little bit differently as well. So we have 2 questions depending on whichever side of that spectrum you're coming from. One, how can play-based programs benefit from becoming familiar with the Preschool Learning Foundations? I would argue that a play-based program is a wonderful program for young children, but I, as their facilitator, as their care teacher, I need to have the lens to see what it is, what the math and engineering and science is in their play, so that I can support them through the materials that I select to go in the environment, so that I can support them through the questions that I ask, through my carefully selected interactions, so that I can keep it play-based, but I, as the provider, have the lens to see what they're learning. We can also use Preschool Learning Foundations in a more academic and structured program, because we can see the benefit of children learning in their natural environment. We can see what it is that may be occurring naturally, that I don't need to drive it. Also, if I am providing a more academic structured program, I want to ensure that what I'm providing them is fully developmentally appropriate. many of us don't have a memory of our early childhood experiences. Our memory may be from a school age perspective. And so we don't want to take our memory of our school age experiences and try to push those onto preschoolers who really need lots of opportunities for problem solving and for play that supports their natural drive to discover cause and effect and spatial awareness and how things work together. And so there's a lot that comes from that natural environment. We want to make sure that our expectations are developmentally appropriate. One more bit about content, because I think this sort of lays a foundation for us, is the 5 developmental strands that you'll find in the Preschool Learning Foundation. So I'm going to just say a very brief little bit about each one, starting at the 12 o'clock position, algebra and functions. Some of you may tremble at the word algebra, but I just want to say this is patterns. This is relationships. This is sorting materials, classifying the materials that they're engaged with, so that the algebra and functions comes naturally when children are engaged in play with a variety of materials that are developmentally appropriate and match their interests. That's where we come in, making sure that we support them in the environment. Next, if you go clockwise, you'll see geometry. Others of you may tremble when you see the word geometry, but it's not just about flashcards. What shape is this? It's about using objects in our environment and thinking about the directions of things, the locations of things, all of the language that goes along with what's under or on top of or within or larger or smaller or the list could go on. We'll continue clockwise, mathematical reasoning. So this comes down to problem solving, developing clarity in our thinking. As a provider, I want to be able to ask those questions, open-ended questions, to support that mathematical reasoning. Why do you think that happened? What do you think would happen if? But if I don't know this content, it makes it a little bit more difficult to think about what those open-ended questions may be. And then, of course, I'll just throw in this as a bonus statement that sometimes not saying anything at all is the best way to respond, because they're engaged and they don't want us to interrupt their play. We'll continue clockwise to measurement. So this is not just learning how to use a ruler, but using units of all kinds. How many 3-year-olds does it take to get from one room to the other if we lay head to toe? How heavy might that be? Which one is heavier? How many counting bears can we get across the table? So not just about rulers, but measurement in general. And then finally, our last one is number sense. And this, again, is not those flashcards of what number is this, but this is how many strawberries would you like in your lunch today? Or this is putting things in order, or pointing out that oh, you only have 2 yellow blocks in your tower. You've put those in a specific location. So that's happening in the natural environment. So these are the 5 content strands that you'll find. Again, you can go back to that, the Preschool Learning Foundations. If you get to the handout for our session, you'll have a link to that you can access for yourself. Free of charge, because it's electronic. But these are those 5 developmental strands that you'll see laid out in depth in that publication. Michelle?
Thank you, Corey. And yes, in relationship to the different experiences that you identified, that are daily activities that children experience, with your support, with your guidance, children are always learning and looking for ways to master new skills. They are learning about their own capabilities. They are discovering their interest. And so our role is to really carefully observe what children are really curious about. What do they want to discover more of? What questions are they asking? When and why? And so that triggers us to intentionally plan spaces that are inviting, aesthetically pleasing, and interesting, for them to really foster that curiosity of mathematical reasoning, experiencing those developmental strands that Corey mentioned, without even acknowledging that they are. But we, as educators, when we have a knowledge base about the mathematical strands and the mathematical concepts, our language around math really supports children's experiences. So you see here, the key word is integrating. How are we integrating mathematics? What does our environment look like? And we are hopeful that these pictures will inspire connections to your environments and say, yes, this is one way I set up. What makes it so inspiring or motivating? Take a look at one of the slide images here. You see natural materials. You see opportunities of spaces for them, for children to manipulate materials as they find interesting. Materials that they can creatively build either alone or with others. So it really promotes that communication of language, math language experiences. So these are just some examples that you may have connection with and say, yes, this is one way that I may set up my mathematical spaces. But thinking about the intentionality of setting up the math materials. Look at these blocks, maybe for older children. I have a TK child, a student, a recent graduate, transitioning into kindergarten, and this was his classroom. Very similar to a family childcare setting when he was 2, 3 years old, very similar materials. Different ages, very similar materials with careful supervision. Depending on the children's age group, you can observe how children go back and forth in manipulating these materials and um, developing mathematical concepts such as geometry, spatial awareness, and mathematical reasoning. So I really encourage you to step back and think about the environment, the materials, and how these interactions between children are creating these rich and fostering natural curiosity for mathematical knowledge. And really think about the experiences and how our adult guidance looks like during these experiences. So children can continue to develop clarity and precision in their mathematical thinking. And so here we are thinking about the learning environment, thinking about the materials the way we set them up. How do we engage children and inviting them to participate with spaces and materials that are meaningful, relevant, and intentional in mathematical concepts? So, one way to think about is what is that balance? Supporting child guided learning, here are some key concepts. When children have opportunities of extended periods of time, children need time to observe, process, plan. It takes a child about 45 minutes to really start an engaging in play. Hmm, where do I want to go play? What do I want to play with? Who do I want to play with? What other materials do I find that can be accessories or expansions of the play that I'm involved in? These opportunities of extended periods of time or free choice time or discovery time is opportunities for children to be creative, opportunities for or educators to observe, carefully observe, and scaffold through questionings when we perceive a cue. It's an interesting story. As my children are playing, my 5-year-old, he's engaged in building and he's really interested in magnetics and blocks, and he's building. And here I am. I'm excited to observe his play, and I sometimes I have to stop myself. I don't observe a cue, and I just say, "Wow, tell me about your building." And he stops me and looks and says, "Mom, I'm focusing. You're interrupting my play." Well, there's a different rapport and there's different trust, but that teaches me a lesson. It reminds me that I need to be very careful in my intervening or my intentional questioning and when. I want to build upon children's experiences, not interrupt their thought process. So I share that as a reflection and awareness because these opportunities give children to take risks. When children are engaged in activities and experiences that they chose, it gives them the opportunities to try new things, to try new materials or the same materials in a different way because they have the space, the trust, the openness, and the guidance of taking on these risks that really support logical reasoning and creative thinking. Open-ended materials, that's it. I can use these materials in different ways. And what does that mean? Right now in this moment, I'm thinking about yesterday's family experience, and it's inspired me to think, create this building because it's connected to a familiar experience. And children are able to use these materials openly and differently, uniquely to their perspectives and building upon their reasoning and problem solving skills. Supporting child guided learning also allows children to develop autonomy, independent skills. Children are learning to create on their own without a teacher telling them, this is how you move this space. This is how you use this material. Children are able and are encouraged and are motivated to independently use materials their own way, meaning their perspective, right? Making connections to what they previous learning with new learning and connecting concepts independently, openly. And these are opportunities of supporting child guided learning that really supports mathematical concepts without children realizing. So, using our knowledge of children's emerging skills and competencies really supports caregivers to equip, to think about the environment, the materials, and the setup to create these opportunities of appropriate development and enhancing child related play. So, thank you, Corey. Transitioning to our activity, let's stop for a moment, let's pause for a moment. Maybe there's a time that you need a measuring tape or you need a ruler, but you don't have one. Well, children are the first ones to be very creative and align spaces or measure spaces or things or items using other items. So this is an activity as an adult parallel process. In this curriculum, what we suggest and we guide participants is to live this experience, is creating a 10-foot line using any items that are easily accessible. But I've practiced this with my own children. And my son, I said, how many cars do you think it would take to measure this shelf, your play shelf? And he says, oh, that's easy. I think 20. Really? Let's try it. So, what are we doing here? If you think back Corey's explanation and guidance on the five developmental strands, it's going beyond of counting the numbers. We're doing a comparison, we're doing a contrast, a hypothesis, an evaluation, problem solving through play. So my child grabs his little basket of cars, different size cars, and he's so excited to measure. And he says, oh, mom, it's more than 20 cars. And I said, really? So let's stop right there and let's take a guess. How many more do you think we need? And let's see if that works. So these opportunities to challenge children and thinking about what items can be used to measure spaces and other materials is engaging, is exciting, but really behind the scenes, we're intentionally planning for mathematical concepts to be developed. Isn't that interesting? And we can do this all day long. They've done it with their bodies. How many hands does it take to measure this long basket? Four hands. Okay, let's figure it out. No fair, he tells me. Your hands are bigger than mine. Great compare and contrasting opportunities for children to develop reasoning and problem solving skills. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Michelle. I just want to point out a comment that I noticed in the chat box. One strategy, this is Carolyn, thank you. One strategy would be to give our little students time to play with materials before jumping in. So I'm imagining, of course, this could be any materials, but I'm imagining, maybe you have a specific activity that you've planned and you have materials that you'll use in this specific activity. What value to give them time to play with those materials first. And as we observe, we may notice that they use the materials in a little bit different way. We've invited a different kind of learning than what we intentionally plan to support. So now we're offering both. And so that's a wonderful strategy. Thank you for pointing that out, Carolyn. All right, so we're going to do, if we were live together in the same room, we would do an activity where we'd make out some plans, but I'm just going to invite you to work this out in your mind and to kind of walk with me through this process as you think. We're going to think about planning for mathematically rich play. So we know that meaningful experiences are so important for young children to connect to. Michelle mentioned that idea that if you have materials, maybe they had an experience on the weekend that they're going to recreate with the materials. So we want to make sure that we plan those meaningful experiences based on our observation of children's interests, or perhaps based on our conversation with parents that let us know what they did on the weekend. Oh, we went to a birthday party, or we went to, whatever the occasion was, that can give us some insight to what the children's interests may be. Based on those interests, we will supply the environment that gives them opportunity to have materials that may be relevant to what's going on in their mind, that may stimulate that engaging play. Let's just say, for example, a grocery store. Imagine the last time you went to a grocery store. Visualize your trip. Did you go to the produce section first? I always go to the dairy first, because in my store, I start at the dairy and then I get over to the dry goods, and then I weave my way through the frozen, and then it gets to the produce. But we all have our different way. How did you navigate the store? Did you see any numbers? Were there any patterns related to your experience? Any shapes? Was there any measurement? Was there any data that you were collecting that you might not have called it data collection, but what kinds, did you have a list? What kinds of things did you experience? When we think about children, what sorts of things have they noticed or experienced in a grocery store? It's interesting to think now post-COVID that some of our children may have gone a couple of years without entering a grocery store. I know a good friend of mine, she, after the couple of years where there was, that period of lockdown time, she took her child, who at that time I think was in third grade, to Trader Joe's and a grocery store, and his eyes were so big, I can't believe what's here. And we some of the things we may have taken for granted, but at this point, many of our children that we're working with have been to the grocery store. What have they experienced? We may engage them in conversations, and then what could we supply in the environment that may stimulate continued play in that, and we can notice, because we have the lens to see it, because we've studied the preschool foundations, the infant toddler foundations, we can see in their play what sort of mathematical principles. I'll just share an example. I was grocery shopping recently, and there was a man in front of me getting corn on the cob. This is the time of year, and it's here in California, the corn on the cob is just right. And this man he had his produce bag, which, if you experience produce bags, I know some of you are international, but here in the US, produce bags are very thin and flimsy. And when every time I put corn on the cob in one, eventually the bag breaks. And this man was stuffing his bag full of corn on the cob. And I was thinking to myself, how is he doing that without the corn on the cob spilling out? And so when he was finished, it was my turn to get corn on the cob. And I even said to myself, I'm going to try it with the produce bag. If he could do it, I can do it. So, and I was only getting 4 cobs, so I put them in the bag. And sure enough, I turned around to put them in my cart, and my bag split open and they fell to the ground. And I was laughing to myself. Now, if I had children with me, if I had my children with me, I may have done what we call self-talk. I may have verbalized, he's putting corn on the cob in the bag. I wonder what's going to happen. When I do that, it always breaks through. Now, this is not adding. This is not just, recognizing numbers on a flashcard, but this is real world quantity, quality, the flimsiness of the bag, what sharp pieces are on the corn on the cob. Thinking through all of these pieces, if I used some self-talk to verbalize the problem that I was solving in my mind, if my child were with me, they would be maybe giving their feedback. Now, I'm just going to tell you the end of the story. I realized his didn't break through because his bag was so full, the ends of the corn never were resting in the bottom of the bag. So it was almost like a cinch around the edges. But this is problem solving. This is math. This is science. This is engineering. This is all these pieces that go together in our day-to-day lives. So when we think about planning for mathematically rich play, it's not just about having manipulatives, but it's also about identifying what are the experiences that these children are engaged with in their real life. What are they interested in? Which takes me to the next slide, thinking about child-centered choices. So this is the process that we just talked through. We want to reflect on children's emerging interests. What are they interested in? Does this child play with the cars every day? Or, as Michelle mentioned earlier about her son, is this child really interested in magnetic play? And is the child building tall towers, or is the child building houses? How can I support that? Maybe I want pictures of different kinds of houses in my block area with a variety of different kinds of blocks. Well, this is supporting mathematical reasoning. This is supporting mathematical thinking because now they may be trying to emulate some of the pictures that they have. So I want to think about what are those emerging interests. In Fresno, California, where I'm from, we have a new exhibit at the zoo. It's called Kingdoms of Asia. It's amazing. And all the families are going to the zoo to check out the new exhibit. And so this may be a topic of conversation among the children. Well, if that's their emerging interest right now, I'm going to think about what real objects could I, or play objects, maybe it's the animals, maybe it's different blocks. Maybe I want to put the blocks and the animals together. But what play items or real objects or math materials might I offer in the environment to support that emerging interest of theirs? And then I'm going to watch, because the cycle never ends. I'm going to watch. How did they respond to those items in the environment? What developmental strands am I utilizing when I support this? Am I noticing that they're making patterns? They're not setting up zoos, they're setting up mommies and babies of animals. And I know that because of the words they're saying. Well, that tells me that's sorting, and that's patterns, that's algebra. And so that tells me, okay, maybe it's not about the zoo, maybe it's about something else, how else I can support that. So really making sure that my environment is full of choices that are centered on the interests that they've expressed, centered on what I've observed, centered on the cues that I'm noticing and that I'm receiving from the children as they're playing. So really thinking about what are their interests first, starting with observation. And we can do ourselves a really big favor when we really focus our time on observation. All right, let's think now about how do we then support and extend those spontaneous math investigations? How do we extend those? So we're observing, we're noticing their interests. What areas are we going to support? I'll tell you another little story. When I was a director of an infant and toddler center, we had a toddler that lost her little Elmo hair clip outside, and it fell through a grate it was like a drainage grate, but it was maybe a foot or two deep. We couldn't reach it. So the entire playtime in the afternoon was focused on how to get her hair clip out of the drain grate. Well, we ended up getting one of the fishing pole toys that had a magnet. But then, how do we, if we get it down there, will it come back out? Will it be facing the right direction, or is it going to get knocked off? Well, as the adult, I may want to say, oh, don't do it that way because it's going to get knocked off. But as a supporter of child-centered learning and child-driven choices, I'm going to watch. I'm going to bite my tongue, and I'm going to watch them so that they have the opportunity to problem solve for themselves. And so you can see these different categories. We'll start with the dark blue, promoting problem solving. This involves using self-talk when you're solving problems, posing questions, inviting the guess and check method. One more little quick story is when my son was a preschooler, he had a stretchy little toy that broke, and he wanted to fix it. He loved this little stretchy toy, and it was like a silicone little stretchy toy. And he said, well, let's tape it. And I didn't have my child development hat on. And I said, well, tape is not going to work because when we, do that, Mom, we have to try it. And so then I switched my hat. Oh yeah. Okay. Let's just try his ideas and try the tape. That didn't work because it didn't hold it together. And eventually he wanted to glue it. And in my mind, I thought, well, this isn't going to work either. And do you know what? It worked. We glued that little thing together, and once that glue dried, he could stretch that stretchy toy for a very long time before it finally gave in. And I knew this, found it out because we took the time to promote problem solving. I had to bite my tongue because I can't solve the problem ahead of children. They need to learn the lesson themselves. And then if we follow the clock, encouraging reasoning. that we use phrases like because or some, all, never, probably. We ask, are you sure? How do you know? Promoting communication, we want to label, describe, restate their concepts and processes, use clear language, ask questions, invite them to share. Next, along the clock, connect mathematics to real experiences. We've talked about that, the zoo, the grocery store, but there are so many more real experiences. And you will only know those by listening, by talking to the families, and practice representing, that we would use pictures and graphs, take tally marks as we're counting, invite verbal descriptions of what they see, um, maybe even taking photographs of what they see. So we practice representing the information that we take in and giving those opportunities, as we see what they're interested in, supports those spontaneous math investigations. So Michelle will transition us to thinking more about planned learning experiences.
Thank you, Corey. So many wonderful experiences to reflect on, and as you're listening to the different opportunities that you provide for young children, it's imperative to think about how we're preparing these environments that really allow children multiple opportunities, not only to explore math, but also explore group activities, collaboration, children's exposure to new materials that they might not be as familiar with, and observe. And I've noticed a pattern in Corey's explanations, and as she's presenting, is pausing, observing, really taking the moment to get to know the individual differences that from the children we are serving. So planned learning experiences is connected to observations. Is how are we getting to know our children? The best way is to pause and observe and take careful note on what children are saying, what they are doing, what they show interest, what expansion of time. So what are they playing more with and why? What are they most curious about? When we are planning these activities, as an intentional teacher, we go beyond free play explorations. We really think about how we're creating small and large group experiences that support math learning concepts. So, we really want to think about introducing children to a wide variety of representations. And you do this. So, this may be a reminder thinking about how are we demonstrating drawings, maps, that pictorial representations, graphics, bar graphs. Very interesting. For my 5-year-old, in one of his last classroom experiences that I was volunteering for, and I was so fascinating to watch this because we talk about this. But when we last saw it, um, the teacher has a graph for how long their names are, how many children with particular first letter names, how many syllables in their names. The, every opportunity to integrate math, and it's through play. Children don't even realize that they're learning it. But my child knew every classmates how many syllables, so connections to numbers. And so the teacher was very intentional of using bar graphs, timelines. In the calendar was meaningful because it was AB pattern, color coded. So children were able to identify, oh, that's a weekend, it's a family, Saturday and Sunday, I'm at home. And they were able to recognize that a day is 5 days through these visual representations of math concepts. Children remember what they did, and they explain their reasoning through these type of representations. Children are able to identify visually, because it's meaningful. It's about their name, it's about their classmates name, it's about their home when it's Saturday and Sunday. So it's thinking about how we're planning these experiences and really inviting children to verbally and in a concrete way represent concepts. So that means tangible, real experiences, and inviting children to communicate their thought process through the use of these representations. So thinking about what this means to children, planning learning experiences and benefits are really develop children's intuitive knowledge, which preparing activities where they are challenged, and we're coaching children's thinking. We're scaffolding through our observations to the next level of their reasoning, to the next level of problem solving, resolving this issue together. So thank you for acknowledging and becoming aware in these concepts. Understanding development of math, it's going beyond the number concepts, right? And it's the development of counting skills. It's subitizing. They see, you throw a dice and they say, "Oh, I won because I have five, and it's more than three. You have three." So it's how are they developing these counting skills? What play experiences are we providing? Levels of geometric thinking. It's thinking about how are they using symbols and geometric shapes that are around them, connecting to home environments, connecting families in this process, but really thinking about what is our knowledge base and using the tools provided, such as the preschool foundations, the infant toddler foundations, as support and resources to really develop our curriculum and activities and planning experiences in support of children's math knowledge.
Thank you, Michelle. So you'll see a quote here on the screen. I'm just going to read it to you so you can hear it for those auditory learners. To find the sweetness in the math itself, in a problem that inspires you to work and struggle until you finally get it, just for your own satisfaction. Now, you may have different math experiences in your own life. You may not see math as being satisfying or inspiring, if you think back to your school age time, but it really is satisfying when a problem gets solved or you understand something in a new way. And if we can see math with this lens, we can see math in the everyday experiences and we can support it in a positive way. And I want to share with you where our training comes from. So we are Family Child Care at its best. This training today has been a 45-minute portion of our 5-hour topic of numeracy, skills, and beyond. And so you can visit this website, www.fccbtraining.org. On the handout, there's a link. But you can check out, we have two different kinds of services. One is direct service workshops, where we provide this topic as well as 20 other topics to family child care providers, family friends, and neighbors who may care for children in an unlicensed setting or child care center programs. We also provide facilitator training, where folks who provide training in their community already can become authorized to share our materials in their own communities and with their own clients that they may work with. And so I want to encourage you to take a look at the website and see what's offered, because there's more to it. We got 45 minutes to give you a taste today, but we really wanted to select portions of this that will hit home for you. So we hope that you're able to walk away with some inspiration, with some ideas, with some strategies for being able to support mathematical learning with young children. And so you'll see also a survey link that's provided in the captions here to a Survey Monkey. You are not able to click the link here on the screen, but on the handout, there'll be there's a link for the survey, and that's one of the captions that should be popping up here. And so we just want to thank you for joining us today. And I've been reading the comments in the chat box as we go, and I feel like we're among like-minded people here, who see play-based learning and child-centered choices as a very valuable way to support children, and that we as facilitators and teachers have the lens to see and the opportunity to support. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much. We hope to see you again in one of our training of facilitators or the Family Child Care at its best as a participant. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the symposium, and we appreciate your time in connecting with this topic with us today.
Yeah, and that survey's in the chat box as well if you'd like to take that down, and we would really appreciate your feedback. So thank you.
And as a reminder, you also have all the links that were provided today in the handout, and we encourage you to download and have that as a resource.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.